So today's Q&A lesson is all about performance anxiety and the psychological approaches, how to practice, some technique tips, and things that you can do on the day of the concert or at the moment of the concert itself. I've taken a number of questions from all my subscribers, from Patreon followers to YouTube subscribers to the website comments, and kind of correlated them into three main questions. So the first question is going to be like about the psychology of performing, just like a frame of mind, what kind of frame of mind you want. The second question will be about how to practice and what techniques we can use to perform better and to help us perform. And then the final question is all going to be about the concert itself. So how we should warm up and how we should walk on stage, those kinds of things that can help students overcome performance anxiety. So of course, watch the lesson for free as always. But if you're interested, you can support these free lessons. There's a support page and there's a link for that in the description. So go check that out if you want, but as always, just pick up the tips for free. So the first question, and like I said, I've taken a lot of people's questions and kind of like compressed them into one overarching question. So the question would be, when I perform in front of people, I don't perform as well as in the practice room. What can I do to make my performances better? And that's a really common thing. You're not alone. I've had issues with performance anxiety. I've taught for 20 years, and I've had lots of students who have performance anxiety, but there's ways that we can go about tackling it. But the first thing you should consider is that the performer you is not necessarily going to be the same as the practice room you. The person who's performing may have to do things a little bit differently than how you might just practice open-endedly in your practice room. It's kind of like public speaking. The way you speak when you do public speaking is not the way you speak when you're chatting with a friend at home, right? Public speakers will speak a little bit more slowly. They'll pause after sentences to give some space, which adds meaning sometimes or allows the listener to process what has been said. And so there's a way of performing that might be a little bit different than when you're in the practice room. Now, some musicians don't get much performance anxiety, so they may not have to change too much when they're on stage. But we have to think as well, we have to, as a performer, as a musician, we have to do what's best for the music at the time. And so what's best for the music at the time might not be how you practiced it at home or how you sounded when you were at home practicing. It might have more to do with adding certain things to the music to make the music sound really good, even though your performance anxiety is not allowing you to perform in the same way that you do at home. One thing you have to consider is usually tempo. The tempos we can play at in the practice room might not be the tempo we want to perform with. For most of my students, if I get them to play 15% slower, they'll perform better. And what you can consider is replacing that 15% of that tempo, the fast speed of the beat tempo, you can replace tempo with other musical qualities. So yeah, fine, you have to practice or you have to perform 15% slower maybe, but you can add a whole bunch extra legato in there, right? You can consider your musical shaping and phrasing that much more. To the audience, your music is sounding good or not. And so trying to play at a fast tempo that you can do at home, but messing up the rest of the musicality is no good for the music. So what you want to do is go a little bit slower in your tempo, but replace that tempo with other beautiful musical qualities, articulation, dynamics, phrasing, musicality, all those important things. And if you do that, people will watch you perform and they'll say, oh, what a great performance. Inside your mind, yes, you might say like, oh, I can play this a little bit better at home. But does that matter? That's just you alone at home. That's not the performing you. The performing you is just a good musician who does what's best for the music and tries to sound as good as possible. And the more in tune with that you get, the more that you can practice in the practice room with the intention of how you're going to perform on stage. And we'll talk about that in the next question. The other aspect of this like psychological frame of mind would be you have to accept your successes as much as your failures. So yeah, sometimes it doesn't go well on stage, but oh well, sometimes we say things that we wish we could take back. There's all sorts of things like that, but you should talk to yourself in the same way you would talk to a child performer. So if I have a student who's performing and they don't perform as well as they wished, you have to imagine, what would I say to that student? Would I say like, nice work, Timmy. Way to mess that one up. No, you would never say that to a child, right? You would encourage them. You'd say, yeah, today's performance, not as good as last week's, but, there's always the next time, and you just have to enjoy yourself. Keep practicing, have a great time, enjoy the rest of the performers that you see. Everyone just support each other, right? And be nice. But if you're not talking to yourself like that, then what are you doing? What are you doing to yourself, right? You should be talking to yourself the way you would talk to a young performer. Being supportive and just saying like, yeah, sometimes we fall and we have to get back up. It's just like soccer, you don't score every single goal you try to shoot on the net. Sometimes you miss and then you try again. That's just the way it goes. So that frame of mind is really important. And that idea of the performer you and the practice room you, and how those can be slightly different people. Last thing I'll say about this is that I can teach master classes and perform in front of hundreds of people. It's fine. I'm totally fine with that. I do get some performance anxiety, but I'm okay with it because I've done it enough that I have like a performer or teacher persona. So like when I'm teaching a master class in front of like 100 people, I'm fine with public speaking. But I did like a degree in history, and when I had to do like presentations in front of people, I was a mess. I couldn't do it. I was awful at public speaking. And that's because I built up a music teaching persona, a way of being in front of people as a music teacher that I became very comfortable with. And it's not who I am at home. Like the teaching me is not exactly the same person that I am at home. But, it's a way of presenting the information, and it's something I'm used to. So you have to build up that performance persona and become comfortable with the idea of presenting. Okay, next question we might say would be, what kind of things can I do in my practice and technique work to help me perform better if I have performance anxiety? A couple of things here. The first thing is like, if this is your first performance of a piece in front of people, then this is just the beginning of the journey. If you think of what students have to go through when they're with a teacher, or university students, they play the piece for their teacher every week when they go to their lesson. They play in master classes, so they perform once a week. They perform this piece once a week all through the year. And then they perform tons. They perform for each other in small groups. They perform in their studio recitals of their teachers. They perform in concerts. They perform in casual gigs. They're just performing the same piece over and over. The first time you perform is like the very beginning of the journey. If you're hoping that the first performance is going to go super well, that's probably not so practical. You have to perform again and again, and that's what helps build that performance persona that you have. That person who knows what tempo to take. That person who knows that they should focus on their phrasing more when they get nervous. So the first performance is just the beginning. You have to perform a lot. And you can start with performing for one person, and then maybe for a group of people, and then on a big stage, and then again and again and again on a big stage. So keep that in mind. One thing I do when I teach students is I'll have them, when it's getting close to the performance time, I'll have them choose 3 different tempos. So for example, let's just do like a C major scale, just because it's a brief example. The first time I have them practice their piece, I'll say go ultra slow, like so ridiculously slow that your muscle memory disengages. Like you can't just rely on your hand muscle memory. So like, so that you have time to think about each note. You know, if it was Lagrima, the ultra slow tempo would be. So this first ultra slow tempo makes you re-engage with the piece. Sometimes we learn pieces and they get into our muscle memory and we kind of just go on automatic pilot, hoping our hands know what to do. Like sometimes in a performance you might look over at your hand and you're like, how is it doing that? Like I don't even know what's coming next. But if you practice ultra slowly, you can disengage from muscle memory and actually think about what's happening in the music on each beat. So I think that's really good for re-engaging with the practicing of the piece. The second tempo would be as fast as you can do it comfortably and well. As fast as you can do it in a high quality way. So if it's a scale, you know, like you want to choose something like your absolute highest potential. And you can practice your piece at that. Within reason, like within the context of the piece. If it's a slow piece, then the faster side of the slow tempo. That is like is something that you've worked towards in your practice sessions, and it's just like the piece at its maximum, right? As long as it's high quality. That just shows you what you're capable of and like what your limits are. And then for the third tempo, you play like 15 to 20% slower. So if this was your slow tempo, and this was your fast tempo, then maybe your concert tempo is like that. So 3 tempos, ultra slow, your maximum at high quality, and then 20% slower, 15% slower as a performance tempo. And that's what you're trying to build up. You're building up some variety of tempos for different ways to practice your music, but that third one is what you can aim for. Now, if you feel great in the concert, you can speed up a little bit, right? No problem. Just like each phrase you can take a little bit faster, or if you just feel great, you can just start faster. But being prepared to play at a slightly slower tempo, but play really legato and super calm and relaxed, that is your aim. So practicing at different tempos, I think, is really important. So 3 different tempos, and practice those 3 different tempos as many times in the day as possible. I would recommend to my students, like, pick up the guitar and play your 3 different tempos whenever you have a chance, like just randomly even, just to like get used to that. The other thing is that if you're dealing with memory, I have a separate video for memory, so if you follow the link to the lesson post, I'll include the other videos that I have on these topics. But starting from random spots in the music is really great. Instead of practicing from the beginning each time, sometimes you should just practice from random spots. Practicing from random spots will engage your memory of the piece much more. And just teach you, like, if you make a mistake and you don't know what comes next, instead of freaking out on stage and starting from the beginning, you just go to that other phrase that you just start from somewhere else. You don't have to like get really nervous about a memory gap. You just jump ahead. When I did my final recital in college, I was playing this big Bach fugue from the second violin sonata, and that fugue is so long, and I left out like 30 bars at one point because I had a memory gap, but I just jumped to another section that I had practiced from, and all the jury said, the adjudicators that were marking me, they just said good recovery. They didn't take any marks off. They just said good recovery, and that was it. I skipped like 30 bars of the piece, but they said great recovery. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us, is just don't get hung up on your memory gap. Just go to that other spot and continue performing. People are there to listen to music. You're there to perform music. Just jump ahead and just continue playing. Another thing in your performing and your practicing is refreshing and resetting after each phrase. So if you have this piece, you might feel like what I did there was a bit much for a performance, but it depends. When you're practicing at home, it's great because you get to the end of that phrase and you consciously build in the idea of relaxing your muscles, taking a breath, relaxing your mind, and then you start fresh, right? You're actually building relaxation into your muscle memory. Your performance anxiety is getting released after each phrase, and you're building that into your muscle memory in your practice sessions. Of course, on the stage, you can make that as drastic or as subtle as you want, depending on how much anxiety you have. Let's say I'm really anxious in a performance. I'm shaking. You'll probably find if you relax after each phrase, you'll recover more and more as you go through the piece because you get more and more used to being in front of people. It's kind of like if you perform your piece in front of people, it's usually not until after the piece that you start to feel relaxed. It's the same thing. After each phrase, just relax. If you're more subtle, if you're feeling pretty good in the performance, obviously don't make a big gesture out of it. You can just... You can just do it in a smaller amount of time. Your reset and relaxation can be in a very subtle amount of time. But if you're feeling really nervous, all it does is it's like you're presenting the phrases more peacefully to the audience. It might not be what you want. It might not be what you did in the practice room, but it might be what's best for the performance and what's best for the music. So refreshing after each phrase and relaxing and just pushing the reset button after each one. Like I said, depending on how much anxiety you have, you can have a longer reset and more relaxation. The other thing is when you practice before a performance, make sure that you're practicing in a way that when you make mistakes, you are in fact just not making a big deal of it. You don't say, oops. You don't get flustered. You just continue. So if I'm doing this piece, I even made a bad face. I shouldn't have even done that. So let me make that horrible mistake again. Yeah, so what? I made a mistake, but I kept going, and I minimized the damage as much as possible, right? That phrase repeats itself in the actual piece. So, you make that little mistake, relax, keep going. You push that reset and you continue going. So, and then you should be practicing this in your practice sessions, not because you can't be doing it for the first time on stage. You have to practice it in the practice room too. You make a mistake, but you cover it up and keep going. Keep a smile on your face or whatever facial expression you had, and you just keep going. So you reset after each one. Last thing about technique is planting. I have a separate video on planting, so I want you to take a look at that separate video. You can follow the link in the description to find the post that includes that video on planting. But let me just briefly talk about how planting can help you in a performance. So planting in the right hand is essentially, in its simplest form, touching the string and resting on the string slightly before you have to play that string. So, for example, if I played a C major scale, see how my middle finger is resting on the next string, but I haven't played it yet? And also notice that as soon as I played the first note, I planted my next finger on that next note. You know. Now, it can cause staccato articulation, so we have to be careful of that. But planting is a practice technique that we use, and a playing technique as well. I have like I said, I have a separate video on planting, and it's really long, so you can go watch that separate video. We can't take up all of this lesson with this. But the idea here is that planting is a very secure thing. If our finger's on the string before we have to play it, like if it were in an arpeggio context, see how after each note, I'm resting a finger on the next string that will be played? So almost simultaneous with playing, I rest the next finger on the string. If you have shaky hands, keeping a finger on the string at all times is really important. We can do this in the left hand too by keeping our fingers down sometimes. And if your hand is shaking, all it is vibrato, right? Like it's great. If your finger's on the guitar, it'll shake less because you're anchored somewhere, right? It's not like hovering your hand above the strings and shaking and then it hits the wrong strings and stuff. So planting can be really great. Now, it's not always what the articulation we want though, because sometimes it can mute out a ringing string. But you can kind of build a graph. It's like if you have lots of performance anxiety, playing with planting will anchor your hand so shaking doesn't disrupt you as much. It also is it's great training for accuracy, because if your finger's on the string it's going to play next, it'll probably play the correct string because it's already there. The other thing it does is it's great for speed training too, because like if your finger's in place before it has to play, then it can execute the stroke at any time. So it's a really great technique. Now, if you're feeling really good, you have very little performance anxiety, so you're feeling really great in a concert, then maybe you don't have to use much planting. You know, you want to be super legato, so you don't want to plant much because that kind of causes some lack of sustain. So great, yeah. If you're feeling great, don't do much of it. If you have tons of performance anxiety, maybe you want to plant quite a bit. Now, yeah, your music might sound a little bit less legato, but sometimes like just getting good sound production and just playing the notes with a nice full big tone and being accurate can be good for the music too. So, all the things I'm talking about is like we can't have an idealized version of ourselves that goes out on stage and just does it perfectly. Maybe at some point you'll reach that level, or maybe something about your personality just loves performing so much that you can walk out on stage and just do it. But all of the things we're talking about are tips that can help you do what's best for the music and improve your performance. It might not be what you want in the practice room, but it's really great on the stage. So planting is one potential thing that you can use a lot of, somewhat, or very little amount of planting, depending on your performance anxiety. Okay, last thing. A basic question would be, what can I do in a performance itself, outside of practicing and psychology, to help me perform better on the day of the concert and at the concert? I would say this. I would say first thing, have a good little warm-up routine. Have like a 5 to 10 minute warm-up routine. So maybe some scales and some slurs and some stretch exercises, some arpeggios, maybe some barre. And go through your 5-minute routine, because sometimes you're like waiting to perform and you don't know how much time you're going to have to warm up. So if you have like a 5-minute routine, you can do your 5-minute routine, and then if you're on in 8 minutes, you can do another 3 minutes of your routine again. You can cycle through your routine again and again. Have that 5 to 10 minute routine totally memorized and something you do every day, so that no matter how nervous you are, you sit down and you just do your warm-up routine. Those kinds of exercises really focus my mind before a performance. It just gets me playing, makes me focus on what I'm doing, and gets me practicing and playing the guitar and being accurate. It focuses my mind a lot. Don't warm up with your piece. Warming up with your piece is a really bad idea, because if you make a mistake, you can freak yourself out right before a performance. So don't warm up with your piece. If you want, you can try out like a touch of it just to check your tone and stuff like that. But like really don't do it, because the only thing you can really do is like freak yourself out. You have to have practiced the piece so much already that you've over prepared, and that you're very comfortable with your practicing of the piece. You know that you've practiced it enough. No matter how much we practice the piece, right before we walk on stage, we're going to wish that we practiced it more. But practicing it 5 seconds before you walk on stage is not going to help. You have to have done that work previously. So just have that warm-up routine and cycle through it so that all your techniques are in order and that your mind can just focus on something else. And then you walk out and you play your piece and you don't worry about it, right? The other thing I'll say is that before you walk out on stage, tune your guitar. Make sure that you're set up properly. If you use things like pads and stuff like that, just have everything organized. If you can put it on stage beforehand, great. Like have your footstool on stage. Or if you use a guitar support, just have it attached already. And just make sure you have everything organized. If you need the music, like put the music out there and then go back to your guitar. Or have your teacher do it or the stage manager do it. But like when you walk up on stage, you don't want to be finicking, like tuning in front of people. That can freak you out. What if your tuning isn't going well? Sitting in front of people tuning is like, it's really nerve-wracking. And like setting up, just make sure you confidently set up really quickly. And then you relax for a second. Think of the music in your head. And cue yourself in. Get into the music before you begin playing. Don't just sit down on stage, frantically tune and set thing up, adjust your footstool and get all freaked out, and then dive into the music, but then you haven't even thought about what you're about to do. You just started doing the movements, and you're just going to freak yourself out completely. So make sure your setup is as minimal as possible, that you can just walk up onto the stage, take a bow or whatever, sit down in your chair. You can lightly check if you're still in tune. Adjust everything. Compose yourself. Think of the music. Feel the rhythm in your body. And then just jump onto that musical train, you want to be involved in the music and not involved in yourself. You want to think of the music when you're playing. You want to think about how beautiful you can make the music. You don't want to be thinking, am I going to make a mistake? Am I going to make a mistake? That's really just like counterproductive, right? So easy warm-up routine, minimal setup when you walk out on stage, so that you can just focus on the music and just having a good time. And then I already talked about lots of things about making mistakes, jumping to new sections, and relaxing after each phrase. Those are all really important steps. And like I said before, like you have to be accepting of success and failure, like if we tell ourselves, I want to perform, like that's something I want to do, and you're going to do it because you wanted to do it, then you have to walk out on stage with the feeling that, yes, I want to do it, and if I mess up, well, that's life, and like when kids are learning to walk, yeah, you fall down and you have to keep trying, but they get better at it, right? And it might hurt a little bit, but the thing is there shouldn't be so much ego in music. You should be able to walk up on stage and play not quite as well as you hoped, but still have a good time and still share music with people, and don't get so hung up on yourself. There shouldn't be so much ego in music. I know it can feel competitive sometimes, but like it has no place. The only thing that really matters is trying your best to do what's best for the music and what's best for the performance at the time. You know, you just try to be as musical as possible and enjoy yourself, and then it's on to the next performance. I've had tons of bad performance experiences, but like I just keep doing it because it's something I want to do. And after a while, like if you're an if you talk to a professional musician or just like a working musician, they'll just tell you, yeah, like it's part of the job. You just show up and you keep doing it. You don't even think about it very much anymore. It's just something that sometimes it goes well and sometimes it doesn't. And each time you learn from it, and maybe you try to practice a little bit more and prepare in your persona, your performing persona. So prepare more. Maybe you work more on memory, or some players maybe they work more on technique. But you just prepare more. You're a working musician. You're doing it. You're someone that does this all the time. You're not someone who's like trying it out. You're someone who's doing it. And then you just accept whatever happens, and you just keep going, and you have a good time about it. Really, in the end, when I think about some of the real bad performance experiences I've had in ensembles, those are the most fun times that I get together with like some friends of mine. Like I played lots with Michael Diaz and Doug Hensley, and we had a couple performances where we didn't maybe do our best. But when we go out for beers and have a good time, like we talk about those and we laugh, and it's like it was great. It was so much fun to do it anyway. So I think that's the healthy attitude is to be a musician, and musicians go out and do it again and again.